I only married her out of pity. No one else wanted her." The words left his mouth so easily, as if he were talking about the weather, as if I weren't sitting right next to him, at that table in front of our friends. They all laughed. I said nothing. I stood up slowly, placed my wine glass on the table, and walked to the restroom. My legs were shaking, but my face was calm, serene, as if I had just heard a bad joke and not the worst humiliation of my life. I closed the restroom door, leaned against the sink, and looked at my reflection in the mirror. 31 years old, a pediatrician, Dr. Ariana Cruz, respected at Chicago General Hospital. A woman who saves lives every day, and my own husband had just destroyed mine in front of everyone. My name is Ariana Cruz. I'm 31, and this is the story that changed my life forever. Chicago has always been my city. I was born here, I studied here, I built my career here. The brownstones of Lincoln Park, the smell of Garrett popcorn in the morning, the biting winter wind off the lake, the endless traffic on Lakeshore Drive. This was all my life. Before I met Victor, before everything turned into this, I took a deep breath, opened my purse, and pulled out my keychain, a small silver stethoscope charm my grandmother gave me when I got into medical school. I squeezed it in my hand. I always did that when I needed strength. "You are stronger than you think, my girl," she used to tell me. But in that moment, I didn't feel strong. I felt humiliated, small, invisible. Victor and I had been married for 5 years. 5 years in which I worked 12, 14-hour shifts in the pediatric ER. 5 years in which he was trying. That's what he always said. "I'm trying, Ariana. Give me time." Time for what was never clear. When we met, he was finishing his MBA. He never finished it. Then he said he was going to start a business. He never started it. Then he said he was going to find a job at a serious company. The serious company never came. And I kept paying the rent on the apartment in Lincoln Park. I kept paying for groceries, electricity, water, gas, the Ubers, the nights out, the dinners with our friends. What a deceptive word. Because that night, in that restaurant in the West Loop, with those people I thought were my friends, I discovered I was never part of anything. I returned to the table. They were all still laughing. Victor was telling another story with that smile I once found charming and now found fake, empty, cruel. I sat down, picked up my glass, and drank it all. No one noticed I'd been crying in the restroom, or maybe they did, and they didn't care. Victor placed his hand on mine as if it were a tender gesture, as if he hadn't just shattered me. "Are you okay, honey?" he asked. I looked him in the eyes, and in that moment, something inside me broke, but not with sadness, with clarity. "Perfectly fine," I replied, and I smiled. Because in that instant, while he kept talking, while the others kept laughing, while the waiter brought another bottle of wine that I would pay for with my card at the end of the night, I decided something that would change everything. But it wasn't time yet. Not yet. Before it all turned to ashes, there was light. There were mornings when I woke up happy. There was coffee brewing in the pot, fresh pastries on the table, and the feeling that I was building something real. That was 6 years ago. I was 25, just having finished my pediatric residency at Chicago General. I was exhausted, proud, and completely in love with my profession. Every child I saved, every mother who hugged me, crying with gratitude, every ER shift where I managed to stabilize a premature baby, all of it filled me in a way nothing else could. Chicago back then was all mine. I'd walk through Millennium Park with my friends from college. We'd eat deep dish pizza in River North, drink craft beers at bars in Wicker Park, get lost in the bookstores on Michigan Avenue. I rented a small apartment in Lincoln Park, a place with old hardwood floors, big windows, and a view of the tree-lined street. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. Everything I had earned on my own. My family was humble. My dad worked as a mechanic in a garage in Pilsen. My mom sold homemade pies on weekends at the Green City Market. They never gave me money for college, but they gave me something better, the certainty that I could do it. And I did. I graduated with honors, secured my position at the hospital. I started earning a good salary. I wasn't rich, but I lived comfortably. I paid my bills, helped my parents, saved a little each month. And then I met Victor. It was at a wedding, a distant cousin's wedding in Oak Brook. I didn't want to go. I had worked a 36-hour shift and just wanted to sleep. But my mom insisted. "Come on, honey, you need a break. It's always work, work, work." So I went. And there he was, Victor Vance. Tall, well-dressed, with that easy smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. We danced, we talked. He made me laugh. He asked about my job and seemed genuinely interested. He told me about his plans: finish his MBA, open his own consulting firm, travel, build something big. It all sounded so possible. We started dating. At first, everything was perfect. Dinners at trendy seafood restaurants, walks along the lakefront, movies at the AMC, brunch at the Daily Grind Cafe. He always suggested nice places, and I always paid. But it didn't bother me. He was studying. I already had a stable income. It seemed fair. "When I finish my MBA, everything will change," he'd say. "You'll see, Ariana, I'm going to give you everything you deserve." And I believed him. Because he was charming, because he made me feel special, because after so many years dedicated only to my career, it was nice to feel chosen by someone. We got married 2 years later. A simple wedding in the garden of a venue in Elmhurst. My family, his friends, a string quartet, cocktails, a buffet, joy. I wore a white dress I bought at a boutique downtown. It wasn't expensive, but I felt beautiful. Victor cried when he saw me walk toward him. "You're the love of my life," he told me that night. And I believed him. We moved into my apartment in Lincoln Park together. He still hadn't finished his MBA, but he was close. I kept working at the hospital. My shifts were grueling pediatric ER, night shifts, weekends, holidays. I'd come home with my legs aching, my scrubs stained, my soul tired from seeing sick children. But Victor was always there. He'd greet me with a hug, make me tea, ask about my day. He made me feel cared for. For a while, that was enough. The months passed. Victor's MBA program stretched on. "The professor is really demanding," he'd say. "I need more time for my thesis." I would nod. I understood. I kept paying the rent, the groceries, the bills. "It's temporary," I told myself. But temporary became a year, then 2, then 3. Victor finally finished his MBA. There was a small ceremony. I bought flowers, took pictures, hugged him proudly. "Now, honey, now the opportunities will come," he told me. And I believed him again. But the opportunities never came. Or maybe they did, and he didn't take them. He started sending out resumes. He said companies weren't responding, that the market was tough, that he needed a connection, an inside track, a real shot. Meanwhile, I kept working. Double shifts, triple shifts, 36-hour on-calls, emergencies that left me breathless. One early morning, a 4-year-old boy came in with severe pneumonia. He almost didn't make it. I worked on him for hours. I managed to stabilize him. When I left the room, it was 6 a.m. My scrubs were soaked with sweat and tears that weren't mine. I got home. Victor was asleep. The kitchen was dirty. The dishes from his breakfast were still on the table. I sat on the sofa, looked around the apartment, my apartment, and for the first time, I felt something strange. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was a question. What am I building here? I squeezed the silver stethoscope charm I always carried in my pocket, the one my grandma gave me. "You are stronger than you think, my girl." But in that moment, I didn't want to be strong. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to feel my effort was worth it. I wanted to believe Victor would change. And then he woke up. He walked out of the bedroom, hair messy, a sleepy smile on his face. "Morning, honey. How was your shift?" I looked at him and decided to keep believing. Because it was easier than facing the truth. Because there was still light, even though it was already starting to dim. Have you ever trusted someone with your whole heart, only to discover they were never who you thought they were? The fractures never arrive screaming. They come in silence, in small details you ignore because you don't want to see them. In comments that make you uncomfortable, but you justify them because he didn't mean it that way. In gestures that hurt, but you bury them because it's easier to pretend everything is fine. The first fracture came on a Wednesday. I hadn't slept in 2 days. I'd had back-to-back shifts at the hospital. A flu outbreak had flooded the pediatric ER, and we were overwhelmed. Kids with high fevers, dehydrated babies, desperate mothers. I had worked for 48 hours, almost nonstop. When I got home, it was 9 p.m. My body was wrecked. My feet, my back, my head, everything ached. I just wanted to shower, eat something, and sleep. I opened the door to the apartment. Victor was in the living room with 3 friends. There were beer bottles on the coffee table, snacks, laughter. A football game was on TV. The place smelled like cigarette smoke. I stood in the doorway, my medical bag in one hand and my keys in the other. Victor saw me and smiled. "Honey, you're here. Come say hi to the guys." The 3 men looked at me. One of them raised his beer in my direction, as if in a toast. The other 2 went back to watching the game. I just wanted them to leave. But I smiled. I waved and went straight to the bedroom. I closed the door, sat on the bed, and looked at my stained scrubs, my dirty shoes, my trembling hands. And then I heard the laughter from the living room, loud, carefree, oblivious. I took off my scrubs, got in the shower, and let the hot water burn my skin. I cried a little, but I wasn't sure why. When I got out, wrapped in a towel, Victor came into the bedroom. "Hey, honey, you got any cash? The guys and I are going to order some pizzas." I looked at him. He had that smile that I once found endearing and now just found careless. "Don't you have any?" I asked. "Nah, I'm out." "But you just got paid, right?" Yes, I had. My bi-weekly paycheck as a pediatrician at Chicago General. Money I earned working shifts that left me breathless. I opened my purse, took out a $50 bill, and gave it to him. "Thanks, honey. You're the best." He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and left the room. I stood there, wet, exhausted, and felt a strange tightness in my chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was discomfort. But I pushed it down, buried it, and put on my pajamas. The fractures kept coming. A week later, Victor asked me for money for a digital marketing certification course. $200. "It's an investment, Ariana. This will open doors for me." I gave him the money. The course was never mentioned again. A month later, he needed $100 for an online diploma that would be recognized by international companies. I gave him the money. The diploma was also never mentioned again. But the outings with his friends were the beers on Wednesdays, the dinners on Fridays, the video games until dawn on Saturdays. And I kept working, kept saving lives, kept paying for everything. The second fracture was worse. It was a Saturday. I had the day off, a rare occurrence. I decided to do something special. Clean the apartment thoroughly, go to the farmer's market, buy fresh ingredients, and make slow-cooked short ribs, Victor's favorite. I spent the whole morning in the kitchen. I chopped onions, prepared the broth, let the meat cook slowly. The apartment smelled delicious. I set the table carefully. I served the plates, warmed the bread. Victor came home at 3 p.m. He was coming from a meeting with a potential partner. He didn't ask what I had cooked. He didn't say it smelled good. He just sat down, picked up his phone, and started eating while texting. "How was your meeting?" I asked. "Fine. What did they say?" "Nothing concrete yet." He kept looking at his phone, chewing without looking at me. I ate in silence. Every bite tasted like disappointment. When he finished, he left his plate on the table and went to the living room. He turned on the TV. I cleared the dishes, washed everything, put away the leftovers. And as I washed, my hands plunged in soapy water, I felt something inside me start to crack. But it still wasn't time to acknowledge it. The third fracture was different. It happened at the hospital. I was in the doctor's lounge, eating a quick sandwich between consultations. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my bank. Transaction declined. Insufficient funds. I frowned. That made no sense. I had just gotten paid. I'd left money in my savings account. I hadn't made any large purchases. I opened the banking app, and my stomach clenched. Someone had transferred $500 from my savings account to my checking account, and from there, someone had withdrawn $450 in cash. I hadn't made that transfer. I hadn't withdrawn that money, but I knew who had. Victor was the only one who had access to my card. I'd given it to him months ago when he said he needed to buy something urgent and I was at the hospital. I never asked for it back. And now he had taken almost $500 without telling me. My hands trembled. I dialed his number. It rang 3 times before he answered. "What's up, honey?" he said in a calm voice. "Victor, did you take money from my account?" There was a silence. "Oh, yeah. I forgot to tell you. I needed to pay for a few things." "What things?" "Personal things, Ariana. It's not a big deal. It's almost $500. Yeah, I know. I'll pay you back next week. Victor, that money was from my savings. I know, honey, but something urgent came up. Don't get mad. We'll talk later. I'm busy. And he hung up. I sat there in the doctor's lounge, my sandwich half eaten, the phone in my hand. And for the first time, I couldn't find an excuse. I couldn't find a justification. I only found rage. That night, I got home. Victor was watching a series in the living room, eating potato chips. Hey, honey, he said without turning around. I left my bag by the door. I walked toward him. I sat on the sofa next to him. We need to talk, I said. About what? The money? He sighed, paused the show, and looked at me with an expression I was starting to know too well, that of a scolded child. I already told you I'd pay you back, Ariana. It's not just that, it's that you didn't tell me. You took the money without asking. Because I knew you'd make a drama out of it. A drama, Victor? It's my money, my work, my savings. Our money, he corrected me. We're married. I stared at him. But I'm the only one who works. The silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable, filled with truths neither of us wanted to say out loud. Victor tightened his lips. You know what, Ariana? I'm tired of you throwing that in my face all the time. I haven't said anything. You don't have to. It's written all over your face, in your tone, in everything. You act like you're the victim here. The victim? Yeah. As if I'm not doing anything. As if I'm not looking. As if I'm not trying. I stayed quiet because the truth was, I did feel like he wasn't trying. But I didn't say it. Victor stood up from the sofa. You know what? Forget it. I'm going out. I need some air. He grabbed his jacket and walked out of the apartment, leaving the door slightly ajar. I was left alone in the living room with the sound of the paused series still on the screen. I pulled the silver stethoscope charm from my pocket. I squeezed it in my hand. You are stronger than you think, my girl. But that night, I didn't feel strong. I felt alone. And for the first time, I began to wonder if being with someone who makes you feel alone isn't worse than being alone for real. There's a difference between not seeing and not wanting to see. I wasn't stupid. I was a doctor. I was trained to observe, analyze, diagnose. I knew how to read invisible symptoms, detect patterns, anticipate crises. But when it came to my own life, I chose blindness. Not because I was weak, but because acknowledging the truth meant making decisions I wasn't ready to make yet. So I did what many women do when they feel everything is falling apart. I pretended nothing was wrong. And while I pretended, I started to save, to observe, to document without him knowing. Everything changed after the night Victor took money from my account without telling me. He came home 3 hours later as if nothing had happened. He apologized with that tired smile he used when he knew he'd crossed a line. Sorry, honey, I'm just stressed. You know I love you, right? And I nodded. Because it was easier. But something in me had shifted. That night, when Victor fell asleep, I took my phone, opened the banking app, and reviewed the transactions from the last 6 months. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just the $500 transfer. There was more. So much more. Small withdrawals I hadn't noticed. $30 here, $50 there, $80, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, charges at restaurants, bars, video game stores, sports betting apps. I added it all up in my head. In 6 months, Victor had spent over $3,000 of my money. $3,000, the equivalent of a full month's salary for me. I sat on the bed with the phone in my hand, feeling the air leave my lungs. And then I did something I had never done before. I took screenshots of everything, of every transfer, every withdrawal, every charge. I saved them in a hidden folder on my phone. I named it Hospital Patient Charts. Victor would never look in a folder with that name. From that day on, I started to observe everything differently. I was no longer just his wife. I was a detective in my own home. I started noticing things I had previously ignored. Like the fact that Victor never brought home proof from his meetings with potential partners. He never mentioned names, never spoke of concrete projects. When I asked, he was always vague. It's confidential, honey. You know how business is. And I no longer argued. I just nodded and made a mental note. One Friday, I decided to run an experiment. I told Victor I had a double shift at the hospital and wouldn't be home until Saturday afternoon, but it wasn't true. My shift ended at 6 p.m. At 7, I came home silently. I walked up the stairs slowly. I opened the door carefully. Victor was in the living room, but he wasn't alone. There were 2 men with him. One of them was smoking. The other had a laptop open. On the table were beers, cash, and what looked like betting slips. Victor was leaning over the laptop, watching something on the screen with a tense expression. "Come on, man, place the bet. They're about to close." One of the men laughed. "If you lose again, you're screwed. Your old lady's gonna kill you." Victor let out a fake laugh. "She'll never know. She works all the time. She has no idea." I closed the door slowly, went down the stairs in silence, and walked to the Starbucks on the corner. I sat by the window, ordered a coffee I didn't drink, and I cried. Not because I was surprised, but because I finally had confirmation of what I already knew. Victor wasn't looking for a job. He wasn't building a future. He was gambling. Gambling away my money and lying about everything. That night, I came home at 11, as if I had really been at the hospital. Victor was in bed, looking at his phone. "Hey, honey, how was the shift?" "Tiring," I said. "Very tiring." I went into the bathroom, locked the door, took out my phone, and wrote down everything I had seen in a note, with the date and details. Friday, October 14, 7:15 p.m. Victor at home with 2 men, gambling. Said, "She works all the time, she has no idea." I saved the note in the same hidden folder, hospital, patient charts. The following days were strange. I continued to be the same Ariana as always. I worked, cooked, cleaned, paid the bills, but inside, I had changed. Now I saw everything with different eyes. When Victor asked for money for gas, I gave it to him, but I took a screenshot of the transfer. When he told me he was going to a job interview, I nodded, but I checked his real-time location. Months ago, he had agreed to share his location with me, so I wouldn't worry. He never imagined I would use it for this, and I discovered the interviews were lies. Sometimes he was at friends' houses, other times at bars. Once, at a casino in Hammond, Indiana. I said nothing, I just took screenshots and kept saving. One day, while cleaning the bedroom, I found something under the mattress. A shoebox. I opened it. Inside were lost betting slips, bar receipts, pawn shop loan slips, and a notebook. I opened it with trembling hands. It was a ledger of debts, handwritten, with names and numbers. Victor owed money to 5 different people, a total of $5,000. $5,000. I felt short of breath. I took photos of every page, every receipt, every ticket. Then I put everything back exactly where it was and left the bedroom as if nothing had happened. That night, Victor came home late. He smelled of beer. His eyes were red. "Where were you?" I asked in a calm voice. "With a potential client. We went for a drink." "Oh, that's good." He smiled at me, gave me a kiss on the forehead. "You're the best, Ariana. Seriously, I don't know what I'd do without you." And he went to sleep. I stayed in the living room. I took the silver stethoscope charm from my pocket. I squeezed it hard. "You are stronger than you think, my girl." And for the first time in a long time, I started to feel that maybe my grandmother was right. Because I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't confused. I was documenting. I was preparing. And though he didn't know it, I had already begun to build the most important file of my life, the file I would one day use to reclaim my freedom. Weeks passed. I kept working at the hospital, kept saving lives, kept being Dr. Ariana Cruz, respected, professional, dedicated. But at home, I was something else. I was a strategist. I saved every rent payment receipt in my name. I saved every grocery receipt, paid with my card. I saved every bill for electricity, water, gas, internet, all in my name. I opened a new bank account at a different bank, without Victor knowing. I started depositing a small part of my salary there. Not much, just enough to have a safety net. And I kept taking screenshots of WhatsApp conversations where Victor asked me for money, of transfers, of locations, of everything, because something inside me knew this wasn't going to end well. And when the time came, I was going to be ready. One night, Victor hugged me in bed. "I love you, Ariana," he said in the dark. "I love you too," I replied, but I wasn't sure if it was true anymore. Because love isn't sustained by words alone. It's sustained by actions, by respect, by reciprocity, and Victor was giving me none of that. I closed my eyes, and for the first time, I imagined a future without him. A future where I didn't have to pretend, where I didn't have to keep secrets on my own phone, where I could breathe without feeling like something was crushing my chest. And that future, as much as it scared me, was starting to feel more real than the present. The truth never arrives whole. It comes in pieces, in fragments you have to assemble like a broken puzzle, and each piece hurts more than the last. I had been documenting in silence for 3 months. 3 months of gathering evidence, taking screenshots, pretending everything was fine while I was crumbling inside. But I still didn't have the full picture. I still didn't know how deep the hole was. Until one Tuesday, something changed. I had the afternoon off that day, a rarity in my hospital schedule. I decided to use the time to run errands, go to the grocery store, pay some bills, pick up the dry cleaning. By the time I was done, it was only 4 p.m. Victor wasn't expecting me home until 7. He thought I had clinic hours until 8. I walked up the stairs to our building, grocery bags in my hands. I opened the door and heard voices. Victor was in the living room, talking on the phone. His voice sounded tense, almost desperate. He didn't see me come in. I silently set the bags down by the door and stood there, listening. I know. I told you I'd pay you this week. Silence. No, I don't have it all right now, but I can give you half, I swear. Silence. Look, my wife gets paid on Friday. As soon as she does, I'll wire it to you, I promise. My blood ran cold. Yeah, she has a good job, she's a doctor, it won't be a problem. My breathing stopped. I'm telling you, yes, relax. Friday, without fail, I'll send you the $1,500, and the other $1,500 the Friday after. Okay. We're set. He hung up. He sat there on the sofa with his head in his hands. I took a slow, silent step back. I left the apartment. I closed the door carefully. I went down and sat on the building's front steps, my legs trembling. $1,500. And then another $1,500. $3,000 he had already promised from my money, without asking, without telling me, as if I were an ATM. I took out my phone. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. I went to my email, searched my inbox, and there it was. An email from 3 days ago that I hadn't seen because I'd been on back-to-back shifts. It was from the bank. Subject, personal loan application approved. I opened the email, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Dear Ariana Cruz, your personal loan application for the amount of $5,000 has been approved. The funds will be deposited into your account on October 18th. No. I hadn't applied for any loan. I opened the banking app with trembling hands, and there it was, a loan in my name for $5,000. Approved. Victor had access to my online banking. I'd given it to him months ago when he said he needed to check something urgently, and I was in surgery. I never asked for it back, and I never changed the password. And now he had applied for a loan in my name, without telling me. I felt the world shift beneath me. I called the bank, my voice trembling. I spoke to an agent. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Ariana Cruz. I need information about a loan that's appeared on my account. The woman checked my details. Yes, doctor, your loan was approved 3 days ago. The funds will be deposited tomorrow morning. Can I cancel it? Cancel it? Well, you would have to go to a branch and submit a formal request, but once the money is deposited, it can't be canceled. It can only be paid off early, but you would have to pay interest. I closed my eyes. And who submitted the application? The application was submitted online from your electronic banking user profile, doctor. At what time? On October 15th at 11:47 a.m. October 15th. That day, I was at the hospital, in surgery, operating on a little girl with appendicitis. And Victor was at home, applying for a loan in my name to pay his gambling debts. Thank you, I said in a broken voice and hung up. I sat there on the steps for how long? People walked by me, neighbors going up and down. Some greeted me. I just nodded. On the outside, I seemed fine. On the inside, I was falling apart. I took the silver stethoscope charm from my purse. I squeezed it so hard it hurt the palm of my hand. You are stronger than you think, my girl. But in that moment, I didn't feel strong. I felt betrayed, used, destroyed. I don't know how much time passed before I could move. Finally, I stood up, went upstairs, grabbed the grocery bags I'd left by the door. I entered the apartment. Victor was in the bedroom. I could hear the shower running. I left the bags in the kitchen. I put everything in the fridge. I walked to the bedroom. I sat on the bed and waited. Victor came out of the bathroom 10 minutes later with a towel around his waist, his hair wet, whistling a song. He saw me sitting on the bed and smiled. "Hey, honey, didn't hear you come in." I looked at him, and for the first time in months, I didn't pretend. "We need to talk," I said in a cold voice. His smile wavered. "About what?" "The loan." He froze. "What loan?" "The $5,000 loan you applied for in my name without telling me." The silence that followed was deafening. Victor ran a hand through his wet hair, averted his gaze. "Ariana, I was going to tell you." "When? After the money was already deposited?" It's complicated. It's not complicated, Victor. It's theft. You applied for a loan in my name without my permission. It's not theft. We're married. It's our money." I stood up from the bed, took a step toward him. "It's not our money. It's my money. I work. I pay for everything. I'm the one who will have to pay back that loan. I know, Ariana, but I had an emergency." "What emergency?" He didn't answer. "What emergency, Victor?" He clenched his jaw. "I have a debt." "How much?" $3,000. "And the other 2,000? "Other gambling debts." I looked him straight in the eye, and he looked down. That was all the answer I needed. I stood there in front of him, feeling everything I had built for 6 years crumble. "How long have you been gambling?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's not what you think." "How long, Victor?" 2 years. "But it's not serious. It's just been bad luck lately." "Bad luck?" I laughed. It was a bitter, broken laugh, full of pain. "You've been gambling away my money for 2 years and you call it bad luck? Ariana, listen to me." "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "I don't want to listen to you anymore. I don't want any more lies." "They're not lies. It's just that—" "What? You didn't want to worry me? You were going to fix it? Everything was going to be fine?" He didn't answer because he knew there was no answer that could justify what he had done. I turned and walked toward the bedroom door. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice worried. "To sleep on the couch. Ariana, don't be like that." I stopped. I turned to look at him. "Don't be like that. That's what you always say. As if I'm the problem, as if I'm the one overreacting. But you know what, Victor? I'm done pretending everything is okay." I walked out of the bedroom, closed the door, and lay down on the living room couch with the silver stethoscope charm clutched in my hand. And I cried. I cried for all the lost time, for all the wasted money, for all the lies I swallowed, for the woman I was before I met him, and for the woman I had become. But in the midst of the tears, something changed. Because I wasn't sad anymore, I was furious. And fury, I discovered that night, is so much more powerful than pain. There are moments in life that change you forever, moments that divide your existence into a before and an after. For me, that moment came 3 weeks after I discovered the loan. 3 weeks in which Victor and I lived like strangers under the same roof. He slept in the bedroom, I slept on the couch. We spoke the bare minimum. Good morning, good night, nothing more. I kept working, kept paying the bills, kept pretending to the world that everything was fine. But inside, I was building something. A plan, an exit. And then came Saturday night, the night that changed everything. Victor had been insisting for days that we go to a dinner with his friends. I didn't want to go, but he insisted so much that I finally agreed. "Please, Ariana, we haven't gone out in weeks. People are going to start asking." People. He always cared more about what people thought than what I felt. But I agreed to go. Not because I wanted to, but because something inside me told me I needed to be there. The dinner was at a restaurant in the West Loop, a beautiful place with warm lights, soft music, wooden tables. The kind of place I would never have gone to alone because it was too expensive. But Victor insisted. "It's important, honey. I need to make a good impression with these people." We arrived at 8. 4 people were already at the table, 2 couples. Rick and Sophie, he worked in advertising. She was an influencer. And Mike and Danielle, he owned a travel agency. She didn't work. They all smiled when we arrived. Hugs, kisses on the cheek, comments on how great we looked. I smiled, said hello, sat down, and from the first moment, I knew something was wrong. The dinner started normally. They ordered wine, made toasts, talked about superficial things, the traffic, the weather, a show they were watching on Netflix. I barely spoke. I just listened, observed. Victor was nervous. I could see it in the way he fidgeted with his glass, in how he constantly changed the subject, in how he avoided my gaze. After the second glass of wine, Rick leaned forward and said, "So, Victor, when are you going to let us in on this business you've been talking about?" Victor laughed, a forced laugh. "Soon, soon. Just finalizing a few details." Mike laughed too. "Details. It's always details with you, man." There was some uncomfortable laughter around the table. I didn't laugh. Sophie looked at me and smiled. "And you, Ariana, how do you put up with this one? It must be exhausting being married to a dreamer." "He's not a dreamer," I replied in a calm voice. "He's a gambler." Silence fell over the table like a stone. Victor shot me a furious look. "Ariana," but I didn't stop. "He's been gambling for 2 years, at casinos, on sports betting, and losing." Sophie put her glass down. Mike and Rick exchanged glances. Danielle looked down at her plate. Victor half stood. "That's enough, Ariana." "Enough of what? Telling the truth? Are you drunk?" "I haven't had a single glass." And it was true. My wine glass was still full. Rick cleared his throat. "Well, I think this is something you two should discuss in private." "There's nothing to discuss," I said firmly. "Everyone here knows the truth. They just don't want to say it." Victor clenched his fists. "We're leaving. Now." But I didn't move. And then it happened. Mike, who had been quiet until then, let out an awkward laugh. "Look, Ariana, we all know Victor has his issues. But that doesn't mean you have to embarrass him in public." I stared at him. "Embarrass him?" "Yeah, look at him. The poor guy is trying. He has bad luck, but he's trying." "Trying to do what? Destroy my life?" Mike sighed. "Oh, Ariana, don't be so dramatic." And then Rick spoke, with that condescending voice men use when they think they're being reasonable. "Look, we get that you're upset, but Victor is our friend, and frankly, we all think you're a little controlling." I froze. "Controlling?" "Yeah. You're always working, always tired, always in a bad mood. Poor Victor doesn't even have room to breathe." Sophie nodded. "It's true, Ariana. No offense, but sometimes it seems like you're the one who wears the pants in the relationship." And then Victor spoke, with that voice I knew so well, the voice he used when he wanted to look good, when he wanted everyone to see him as the victim. "You guys just don't know what it's like living with her." I felt the air leave my lungs. "It's exhausting. It's always work, work, work. She never has time for me. Never wants to go out. Never wants to do anything fun." Rick nodded sympathetically. "I get it, man." And then Victor said the words that changed everything. "I only married her out of pity. No one else wanted her." The world stopped. All the noise in the restaurant disappeared. Only those words remained. "I only married her out of pity. No one else wanted her." And they all laughed. Sophie, Mike, Rick, Danielle, all of them. I sat there, motionless, feeling something inside me break into 1,000 pieces. Victor kept talking, fueled by their laughter. "Seriously, I met her at that wedding and she was all alone. No one was talking to her. I felt sorry for her. I thought, well, someone's got to do her a favor." More laughter. "And then it turned out she was a doctor." I thought, not bad. "At least she has money." Mike slapped him on the back. "You're a genius, man." And they all kept laughing, all of them except Danielle, who was looking at me with something like pity in her eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't say a word. I just stood up slowly, with dignity. I took my purse and walked to the restroom. I locked myself in a stall, sat on the toilet lid, and breathed. Once, twice, 3 times. I took the silver stethoscope charm from my purse. I squeezed it in my hand until it hurt. "You are stronger than you think, my girl." And in that moment, something inside me changed. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't pain. It was absolute clarity. Because I finally understood what I had to do, I came out of the restroom 5 minutes later. I walked back to the table, my back straight, my head held high, my heart pounding with strength. They were all still laughing. They continued with their wine, their jokes, their cruel comments. Victor saw me approach and smiled. "There she is. The drama's over." I reached the table. I didn't sit down. I opened my purse and took something out. A manila envelope. I dropped it in the middle of the table. The sound was sharp, definitive. Everyone fell silent. Victor looked at the envelope, frowning. "What is this?" "Open it," I said in a cold voice. "Ariana, don't start. Open it." There was something in my tone that made him obey. He opened the envelope and took out the contents. They were papers, lots of papers, rent payment receipts, all in my name, electricity, water, gas, and internet bills, all paid by me. Bank statements showing all the transfers he had made without permission. Screenshots of conversations where he asked me for money. Photos of the betting slips I found under the mattress. Photos of the notebook with his debts. The document for the $5,000 loan applied for in my name, without my permission. Everything. Absolutely everything. Victor turned pale. The others stared at the papers, their eyes wide. I leaned over the table, looked Victor straight in the eye. "I only married you out of pity," I said in a calm voice. "No one else wanted you." The silence was absolute. "And tomorrow at 10 a.m., we are signing the divorce papers. You and me. At my lawyer's office." I took another paper out of my purse. A legal summons. I dropped it in front of him. "And you'd better show up. Because if you don't, I will proceed with a fault divorce for financial abandonment, and you will lose absolutely everything." Victor couldn't speak. His face was white. His hands were shaking. I straightened up, looked at the others. "Have a lovely evening," and I turned around. I walked toward the restaurant exit, my head held high, without looking back, without crying, without shaking. Because finally, after so many years of pretending, of enduring, of swallowing my pain, I was finally free. I stepped out onto the street. The cool Chicago air hit my face. I took a deep breath, took out my phone, and called an Uber. And as I waited, I looked up at the night sky. The city lights glowed against the clouds, and I, for the first time in years, felt like I could breathe. The longest night of my life wasn't the night of the dinner. It was the one that came after. I got home in an Uber, walked up the stairs to the building, feeling like my body weighed 1,000 pounds. I opened the apartment door. I stood in the entryway, looking at the space that had been my home for 5 years, and it no longer felt like my home. It felt like a prison from which I had finally found the key. I took off my shoes, left my purse on the table, walked to the bedroom, and started packing. I pulled a suitcase from the closet, the biggest one I had, and started filling it with my clothes, my shoes, my personal things. Not everything, just the essentials. My medical scrubs, my comfortable hospital shoes, the clothes I actually wore, photos of my family, my grandmother's silver stethoscope charm. The rest could stay. Victor could have it all, because nothing in that apartment was worth more than my peace of mind. It was 11 p.m. when I finished packing. I closed the suitcase, left it by the door, and sat on the sofa to wait, because I knew he would be back. And I knew it wouldn't be easy. Victor arrived at 1 a.m. He burst into the apartment like a hurricane, slamming the door, throwing his keys on the table so hard they bounced and fell to the floor. "What the hell was that, Ariana?" His voice was a shout full of rage, humiliation, impotence. I remained seated on the sofa, calm, my hands on my lap. "It was the truth," I replied in a quiet voice. "The truth? You made me look like an idiot in front of my friends. You made yourself look like an idiot all on your own. I just showed the evidence." He strode toward me, furious. "You had no right to do that. You had no right to humiliate me like that." I stood up from the sofa, looked him straight in the eye. "I had no right? And you had the right to say you married me out of pity? To say no one else wanted me? To laugh at me in front of everyone?" I was joking. It wasn't a joke, Victor. It was cruelty. It was pure humiliation. "You're exaggerating." "I'm not exaggerating." My voice rose for the first time, and something in me broke. All the emotions I had bottled up for months came out like an avalanche. "I've been putting up with your lies for years. I've been paying for everything while you pretend to look for a job. I've spent years feeling worthless because you make me feel that way." "I never made you feel that way." "Yes, you did. Every time you used my money without asking. Every time you lied about where you were. Every time you made me feel like I was the problem. Every time you ignored me. Every time you made me feel like I should be grateful that someone like you would put up with me." Victor clenched his fists, his face red, his eyes shining with rage. "So what now? You're just gonna leave me? I already left you. At the restaurant. In front of everyone, just like you left me." "You can't do this." "I already did. We're married, Ariana. And tomorrow, we're starting the divorce proceedings." He stood there in front of me, breathing hard. And then he changed his strategy. His face softened, his shoulders slumped, and his voice became soft, almost pleading. "Ariana, please, don't do this." I recognized that voice. It was the voice he used to manipulate me. The voice of the vulnerable Victor, the Victor who just needed one more chance, the Victor who was really going to change this time. "I love you," he said, his voice cracking. "I know I messed up. I know I said horrible things, but I was drunk. I was nervous. I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did." "No, Ariana, I swear. I love you. You're the love of my life." He took a step toward me, tried to take my hands. I pulled them away. "If you really loved me, you wouldn't have done any of this. Everyone makes mistakes." "This wasn't a mistake, Victor. This was a pattern. For years. And I was foolish enough to ignore it. You're not foolish." "Yes, I was. I was foolish for believing you would change, for believing your promises were real, for believing you would one day value me." I turned, walked toward the door where my suitcase was. "But I'm not anymore." Victor followed me. "Where are you going?" "To my parents' house." "And what about me? What am I going to do?" I looked at him over my shoulder. "I don't know. And frankly, that's not my problem anymore." But Victor wasn't going to let me go that easily. He stood in front of the door, blocking my way. "You're not leaving. Move." "No." "Victor, get out of my way." "No, you're not going to destroy my life like this." "I'm not destroying your life. You did that yourself. If you leave, everyone is going to think I'm a failure." And there it was. The truth. He didn't care about losing me. He cared about losing his image. He cared about what people would think. He cared about being seen as the one who was left. But me, as a person, as a wife, as the woman who had supported him for years, I never mattered to him. "Let me pass," I said firmly. "No. Let me pass, or I'm calling the police." He laughed. A bitter, contemptuous laugh. "Go ahead, call them. And when they get here, I'll tell them you threatened me, that you attacked me, that you're the crazy one." I stood motionless, because in that moment, I saw who he really was. Not the charming man I met at that wedding. Not the husband who hugged me at night. Not the victim he pretended to be in front of his friends. He was a manipulator, a liar, a man willing to destroy me to save his ego. I took out my phone, opened the voice recorder, and pressed record. "Victor," I said in a clear voice, "are you threatening me?" "I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you the truth." "Are you telling me that if I call the police, you're going to lie about me?" "It's not lying, it's—" He stopped, and he finally understood what I was doing. He looked at me with eyes full of hatred. "You've always been a calculating bitch," I responded calmly. "I've always been an intelligent woman. It just took me a long time to realize it. And then I did something I never thought I would do. I screamed, 'Help! Help me!'" Victor's face went pale. "What are you doing? Help, please!" The doors of our neighbors started to open. Mr. Henderson, the man from the apartment next door, stepped into the hallway. "What's going on, doctor?" "He's holding me against my will," I said, my voice trembling. "He won't let me leave." Mr. Henderson looked at me, then looked at Victor with a disapproving face. "Young man, let her pass." Victor clenched his jaw, but finally he stepped aside. I grabbed my suitcase, walked to the door. Mr. Henderson walked me to the stairs. "Are you all right, doctor?" "Yes, thank you, Mr. Henderson. Do you need me to call someone?" "No, I already called my dad. He's on his way." It was a lie. I hadn't called anyone. But I went down the stairs, out onto the street, and called another Uber. While I waited, I looked up. Victor was in the apartment window, looking down at me, his arms crossed, his face full of hatred, and I felt nothing anymore. Not love, not pity, not guilt, just relief. The Uber arrived 10 minutes later. I got in with my suitcase. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Pilsen. To my parents' house." During the entire ride, I didn't cry. I just looked out the window, watching the streets of Chicago go by. The same streets where I had built my life, the same streets where I had lost so much, and the same streets where I was now going to rebuild myself. I got to my parents' house at 2 a.m. I knocked on the door. My mom opened it in her pajamas, her eyes full of sleep. "Honey, what happened?" And there, I finally broke. She hugged me, and I cried. I cried for everything I had lost, for all the wasted years, for the woman I was, and for the woman I would never be again. But I also cried with relief, because finally, after so much time, I was free. The next few days were strange. I stayed at my parents' house, in my childhood bedroom, with the same walls, the same curtains, the same memories of when life was simpler. My mom brought me tea. My dad didn't ask questions. He just hugged me and said, "You're safe here, my girl." But I didn't stay still, because the pain could wait. Justice could not. On Monday at 9 a.m., I called Monica Reed, a divorce lawyer a colleague from the hospital had recommended to me months ago. "Dr. Cruz, how can I help you? I need to file for divorce. Urgently." "Do you have documentation?" "I have everything." That same afternoon, I went to her office on Michigan Avenue. I arrived with a folder full of evidence: payment receipts, bank statements, screenshots, photos of the debts, the fraudulent loan document, the recording of the night Victor threatened me. Everything. Miss Reed reviewed every document, her expression growing more surprised with each page. "Doctor, this is a solid case. Very solid. How long will it take?" "With this documentation, we can file for a fault divorce. Grounds: financial infidelity, threats, misuse of marital assets. If he doesn't contest it, it could be done in 3 months. If he fights it, 6 months max. I want to proceed." "Are you sure?" "Once we start, there's no going back." I took the silver stethoscope charm from my purse. I squeezed it in my hand. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Victor was served with the divorce papers on Wednesday, my lawyer told me. He signed for them, but he didn't look happy. "I don't care how he looks. Doctor, be prepared. He's going to try to fight this. Men like him always do." And she was right. Victor started calling me, 10 times a day, 20, 30. I didn't answer. He started sending texts. "Ariana, please, let's talk. This is a mistake. I love you. We can't end like this. My friends are turning their backs on me. They all think I'm a monster. This is your fault. If you don't drop this, you're going to regret it." I saved every message, took screenshots, and sent them to my lawyer. "Perfect," she said. "This is harassment. We'll use it." But Victor didn't just contact me. He started calling my parents, my mom. "Ma'am, please, talk to Ariana." "This is all a misunderstanding." My mom hung up on him. He tried to contact my colleagues at the hospital, my friends. One of them, Lucia, called me, worried. "Ariana, Victor just messaged me saying you're sick, that you're having a nervous breakdown, that you need psychiatric help." I took a deep breath. "I'm not sick, Lucia. I'm divorcing a manipulator." I figured. "I just wanted you to know, if you need anything, I'm here for you." That call made me understand something. Victor wasn't going to stop. He was going to try to destroy my reputation. So I did the only thing I could do. I got ahead of it. That night, I wrote a long, honest, direct message. I sent it to my close group of friends, to my trusted colleagues at the hospital, to my extended family. It said, "Family and friends, I want you to hear this from me before you hear rumors. Victor and I are getting a divorce. The decision is final and non-negotiable. For years, I financially supported our marriage while he was gambling, lying, and accumulating debts in my name. He took out a $5,000 loan in my name without my consent. I have saved all the evidence. I'm not looking for pity, only for peace and justice. I ask for your respect for my privacy at this time, and if Victor contacts you with stories about my mental health or my character, please know that it is a lie. Thank you for your support, Ariana." I pressed send and waited. The replies started coming in within minutes. "I support you, cousin. You're so brave, Ariana. I always knew something was off. I'm here for whatever you need." "That bastard doesn't deserve your time," I cried, but this time not from sadness, but from gratitude, because I wasn't alone. Meanwhile, Victor's world began to fall apart. His friends, the same ones who laughed with me at the restaurant, started to distance themselves. Rick stopped talking to him. Mike blocked him on WhatsApp. Sophie posted on her Instagram stories, "Surround yourself with people who lift you up, not drain you," with a picture of a sunset. Obviously, Danielle, the only one who had looked at me with pity that night, sent me a private message. "Ariana, we don't know each other well, but I want you to know that what Victor did was horrible." And I stayed quiet. "I'm so sorry. I hope one day I have your courage." I replied, "It's never too late to find it." 2 weeks later, I got another call from Miss Reed. "Doctor, I have news. Tell me, Victor has agreed to an unconditional divorce. He signed everything." I was silent. "Everything?" "Everything. He waives any right to your assets. He accepts the grounds for divorce. He's not asking for alimony. He's not asking for anything. He just wants this to be over quickly." "Why?" "Because we showed him all the evidence. We explained that if we went to trial, not only would he lose, but we could press criminal charges for the fraudulent loan." He got scared. I closed my eyes. "When can I sign?" "Next Friday at 10 a.m. I'll be there." That Friday, I arrived at the courthouse with my mom. Victor was already there, alone. Without his friends, without his smile, without his arrogance. He looked smaller, older, more defeated. He saw me walk in. He tried to smile. "Ariana." I didn't respond. We went into the courtroom, signed the papers. The judge officially declared our marriage dissolved, and I walked out of there a single woman. Free. Reborn. Outside the courthouse, my mom hugged me. "I'm so proud of you, honey." "Thanks, Mom." "How do you feel?" I looked up at the sky. It was a sunny day in Chicago. The air felt crisp and clean. "I feel light," I said, "like I've been carrying a huge rock for years, and I finally let it go." I took the silver stethoscope charm from my purse. I watched it shine in the sun. "You are stronger than you think, my girl." My grandmother was always right. Karma doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes in silence, like a shadow that follows you until it catches you. And Victor found that out the hard way. 3 months passed after the divorce. I had returned to my life, to my apartment, to my job at the hospital. But now, everything was different. My apartment in Lincoln Park was now just mine. I changed the locks, painted the walls, bought plants, opened the windows, and let the sun in. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. At the hospital, my colleagues treated me with a renewed respect, not out of pity, but admiration. "Dr. Cruz, you're an example," a young resident told me, "that we can be strong even when everything falls apart." I smiled. It's not about being strong. It's about knowing when to stop carrying what isn't yours to carry. But Victor wasn't so lucky. The news came to me in pieces through comments, messages from friends, chance encounters in the city. And every piece of news confirmed something my grandmother always used to say: a crooked path leads to a crooked end. First, he lost his social circle. Rick, Mike, Sophie, they all distanced themselves. Not because I asked them to, but because they started to realize who he really was. One day, Lucia told me that Victor had borrowed money from Rick, $500, and never paid it back. Rick started asking around and discovered that Victor owed money to other people, that the business meetings were gambling sessions, that the opportunities were lies. "The bastard used me," Rick told Lucia, and we defended him. The friend group dissolved, and Victor was left alone. Second, the debts caught up with him. The people he owed money to started collecting with interest, with threats. One day, I saw a post in a Lincoln Park neighborhood group on Facebook. "Does anyone know where Victor Vance lives? He has an outstanding debt." Another neighbor replied, "He moved out a month ago. Didn't leave a forwarding address." Victor had to leave the apartment that I paid for. He moved into a rented room in a rougher neighborhood, with no furniture, nothing. And every month, the debts grew. Third, his reputation was destroyed. In Chicago, especially in certain circles, everyone knows everyone. Everyone talks. And the story of what happened that night in the West Loop restaurant spread like wildfire. Did you hear about Victor Vance? Yeah, the guy who married the doctor for her money and then humiliated her in public, and she left him with the receipts on the table. How embarrassing. Victor tried to find a job, but every time someone Googled his name, comments, gossip, stories would pop up. No one wanted to hire him. No one wanted to be associated with him. He had become an example, a cautionary tale. Don't be a Victor. Fourth, his family found out. 3 months after the divorce, Victor's mom sought me out. She came to the hospital and asked for me at the front desk. When they told me, I hesitated, but I finally agreed to see her. We sat in the hospital cafeteria. She ordered a coffee. I just had water. Dr. Ariana, she began, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, ma'am. Yes, I do. Because I found out about everything. The gambling, the debts, how he treated you. There were tears in her eyes. I raised him better than that, or at least I thought I did. Ma'am, with all due respect, Victor is an adult. His decisions are not your responsibility. But I feel like I failed you, that we brought you into our family and didn't protect you. I shook my head. You never did me any harm. Your son did, and he is the only one responsible. She nodded, drying her tears. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you think he can change? I thought for a moment. I think people can change, but only if they want to, and only if they face the consequences of their actions. And do you think he's facing them? Yes, I replied softly. I think he finally is. She nodded, stood up. Thank you for seeing me, and forgive me, on behalf of my family. There's nothing to forgive, ma'am. Take care. She left, and I sat there with my glass of water, feeling something strange. It wasn't satisfaction in his suffering, it was simply closure. Fifth, he lost his last chance. 2 months later, I heard from Danielle, yes, the one from the restaurant that Victor had found a job. A real job at a logistics company as an administrative assistant. It wasn't much, but it was something. Thought you'd want to know? Danielle texted me. Maybe he's trying to change. I just replied, I hope so. But 2 weeks later, Danielle texted me again. They fired him. Why? He missed 3 days in a row without calling, and when he came back, he smelled like alcohol. They gave him a second chance. He missed work again. I closed my eyes, because there was the truth. Victor hadn't changed. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. Sixth, the final karma. 2 weeks ago, I ran into him. It was downtown Chicago. I was walking down State Street after buying some books, and there he was. Sitting on a bench, his clothes wrinkled, his beard unkempt, a vacant look in his eyes. He looked broken. Our eyes met. He looked down, and I kept walking. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. Because Victor was no longer a part of my life. He was just a reminder of the woman I was, and the woman I will never be again. That night, I got home to my apartment, made myself some chamomile tea, and sat by the window, looking at the city lights. I took the silver stethoscope charm from my purse. I placed it on the table. You are stronger than you think, my girl. My grandmother was right, but now I knew it. I didn't just believe it. I knew it. Victor's karma wasn't that I destroyed him. It was that he destroyed himself. He lost his friends because he used them. He lost his home because he never valued it. He lost his reputation because he tarnished it with his own actions. He lost opportunities because he never took them seriously. And in the end, he lost his dignity. Not because of revenge, but because of natural consequences. Because life has a way of balancing things. Not always quickly, not always obviously, but always justly. A year after the divorce, my life was completely different. Not because I had changed cities or jobs, but because I had changed. I was still Dr. Ariana Cruz. I still worked at Chicago General Hospital. I still saved lives. I still loved my profession. But now, when I came home after a long shift, I didn't feel that weight on my chest. There was no one waiting to ask me for money, no one to minimize my exhaustion, no one to make me feel my efforts weren't enough. There was only peace. I completely redecorated my apartment. Nothing from that era remained. Not the furniture, not the colors, not the energy. Now the walls were white with mint green accents. There were plants in every corner, new books on the shelves, a hammock by the window where I sat and read on Sundays. And on the living room wall, I hung a framed print with a phrase I found that reminded me of who I was now. The peace I have today is worth more than any blood tie. My relationship with my parents grew stronger. Every Sunday, I went to their house in Pilsen for dinner. My mom would make her famous pot roast. My dad would ask about the hospital, and I would tell them my stories. "You look different, honey," my mom told me one Sunday. "Different how?" "Lighter, like you were carrying a sack of rocks and you finally put it down." I smiled. "That's exactly how I feel, Mom." My dad took my hand. "We always knew you were strong, but now you know it too." And he was right. At work, I was promoted. They named me head of the pediatric emergency department, not because they felt sorry for me, but because I deserved it. Because I had proven, not just in my personal life but in my profession, that I was capable of facing crises and coming out stronger. The day they gave me the news, the hospital director called me into her office. "Dr. Cruz, this promotion is a recognition of your dedication, your professionalism, and your leadership." "Thank you, doctor." "And," she added with a soft smile, "it's a reminder that women who stand up on their own fly higher." I left that office with tears in my eyes, but they were tears of pride. I also started going out again. Not with men, I wasn't ready for that yet, but with friends. With Lucia, my colleague from the hospital. We'd try new coffee shops on Saturday afternoons. With my cousins, we'd go for walks along the lakefront. With Danielle, yes, the one from the restaurant who became an unexpected friend, we'd go to the movies. I laughed more in those few months than I had in the last 5 years, and I realized something important. I didn't need a man to be happy. I needed to be happy with myself. And finally, I was. One day, 6 months after the divorce, one of my patients, a 7-year-old girl with pneumonia, gave me a drawing. It was a picture of me in my white coat, with a stethoscope around my neck and a smile. Underneath it said, "Thank you for saving me, doctor. You're my hero." I broke down. Because for so long, I had been so busy trying to save my marriage that I forgot my real purpose was to save lives. I taped that drawing to the wall of my office, and every time I see it, it reminds me why it was all worth it. 3 months ago, I did something I never thought I would do. I started therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand. Understand why I stayed so long. Understand why I ignored the red flags. Understand how to avoid repeating the same patterns. My therapist, Dr. Campos, helped me see things I couldn't see on my own. "Ariana, you weren't stupid. You were loyal. And loyalty isn't a bad thing. It becomes bad when that loyalty turns into self-destruction. And how do I know the difference? When you start losing pieces of yourself to keep someone else afloat, that's the difference." And there, I understood everything. My grandmother's silver stethoscope charm is still with me. I carry it in my coat pocket every day now. It's not just an object anymore. It's a reminder of where I come from, what I survived, and the woman I became. 2 weeks ago, I was at the hospital, in the doctor's lounge, grabbing a quick coffee between consultations. A young resident sat down next to me. "Dr. Cruz, can I ask you something?" "Of course. How are you so strong?" I looked at her. There were tears in her eyes. "What's wrong?" "My boyfriend, he's making me feel like I'm not enough, that I work too much, that I don't have time for him, and I feel like I'm losing pieces of myself." A lump formed in my throat because I knew that feeling all too well. "Does he work?" I asked. "No, he's finding his path. Do you support him financially?" She looked down. "Yes." "And does he value your effort?" "He says he does, but you don't feel it." She nodded. I took her hand. "Listen to me carefully. You are not responsible for saving anyone. Your only responsibility is to yourself. And if someone makes you feel small, it's not because you are small. It's because they need you to feel that way so they can feel big," she cried. "But I love him. I loved him too, and it almost destroyed me. Because love isn't enough if it doesn't come with respect, with reciprocity, with value." "And how did you know when to leave?" I smiled sadly. "When I finally realized that being with someone who made me feel alone was worse than being alone for real." The resident left that afternoon. I don't know if she took my advice. I don't know if she stayed or left. But I know I planted a seed. And sometimes, that's enough. Today is a sunny Saturday in Chicago. I'm in my apartment, windows open, soft music playing, a book in my hands, and I feel whole. Not because I have everything, but because I finally have myself. Sometimes I think about Victor, not with anger, not with sadness. Just, with nothing, because he's no longer part of my story. He's just a lesson. A painful lesson, yes, but a necessary one, because he taught me something no class, no book, no lecture could have ever taught me. My silence almost destroyed me, but my truth saved me. I no longer make myself small so others can feel big. I no longer ignore red flags, hoping they will turn green. I no longer apologize for being successful, for being intelligent, for being strong, because I learned that the peace I have today is worth more than any blood tie, that sometimes losing a family is gaining a life, and that the most powerful woman isn't the one who never falls. It's the one who falls, gets up, dusts herself off, and keeps walking with her head held high. I took the silver stethoscope charm from my pocket. I watched it shine in the sunlight streaming through the window. "You are stronger than you think, my girl." I smiled. "I know, Grandma. Now I know." My silence almost destroyed me. My truth saved me. I no longer make myself small so others can feel big. The peace I have today is worth more than any blood tie. Sometimes losing a family is gaining a life.